Spain sells itself as the most open country in Europe. Sun, coastline, public footpaths that seem to invite you in wherever you point the car. So why are there corners of this country where the state will fine you, arrest you, or quietly point a rifle at you for crossing a line in the dirt? 10 of them are on this list. The worst is a stretch of farmland in Almería called Palomares, where 4 American hydrogen bombs fell out of the sky in 1966. The fields are still fenced today. This list does not start with the bomb. It starts with the reasons. Some of these places are forbidden because the army is using them, some because the science matters more than your curiosity, some because the ground itself is no longer safe. And 1 or 2 are forbidden for reasons almost too small to believe. We begin in the north, in a desert that should not exist. Number 10. The bombing range at Bardenas Reales in Navarra. If you have ever seen a photograph of the Bardenas and assumed it was Arizona, you are forgiven. It is a real semi-desert in the north of Spain, all cracked clay, wind-carved towers, and a famous lone pinnacle called Castil de Terra that looks like a leftover from a western. People come to walk it and drive the loop. What most of the people never clock is that the heart of it belongs to the Air Force. In 1951, under Franco, the military carved a slice out of this desert and turned it into a live air-to-ground firing and bombing range, without ever really asking the people who farmed around it. It has run without a break ever since, one of the most active ranges of its kind in Europe, used by Spanish pilots and their NATO allies to practice putting ordnance into the dirt. Old fighter jets are parked out on the clay as targets. Around it, the wider Bardenas was declared a natural park and a UNESCO Biosphere reserve, all gentle eco-tourism and protected birds. But right in the middle of that protected land, behind a fence and a long run of warning signs, sit roughly 2,000 hectares where the bombs still fall. Something like 30 serious accidents have been logged here over 60 years. You can hike too, within sight of the perimeter. You cannot walk in. The jets come in low over a biosphere reserve, and then they shoot. And that is only the gentlest entry on this list. Number 9. The San Gregorio Training Center, outside Zaragoza. North of the city, the steppe runs flat and empty for kilometre after kilometre, and at first glance it looks like nothing at all. That is rather the point. This is the largest piece of military training ground in Spain, almost 34,000 hectares of it, with a perimeter that runs to 108 kilometres. The army began buying the land back in 1910, expanded it hugely in the 1970s, and today it is where Spain trains its tanks, its artillery, and increasingly its NATO partners, with live fire and full battle groups. Out in the middle of it, the engineers built a town. Not a real one, a combat town. 80-odd concrete buildings of 1 and 2 stories, with streets and yards and tunnels running between the houses, all of it designed so that soldiers can rehearse fighting their way through a city street by street. Nobody lives there, and nobody ever will. The King of Spain has watched exercises roll across this ground, but you will not get near it, because the whole steppe is a closed military zone, and the fake town at the centre of it sits empty between battles, waiting for the next set of soldiers to come and pretend to take it. Spain's largest emptiness, and it is emptiness on purpose. Number 8. El Cabril, in the hills of Córdoba. Tucked into the foothills of the Sierra Morena, in the district of Hornachuelos, there is a complex of low concrete vaults that you will find on no tourist map, and that no road sign is in any hurry to point you toward. This is where Spain puts its radioactive waste. El Cabril is the national store for low and intermediate level waste, The gloves and filters and scrap from every nuclear plant, hospital and laboratory in the country run by the State Waste Company since the mid-1980s. The waste is sealed into concrete cells. The cells are capped, and the whole thing is engineered to hold its contents in place for around 300 years, which is the length of time the planners decided it would take for the material inside to fade to something harmless. 300 years. There is a visitor centre nearby where you can learn how it all works, but the vaults themselves are a controlled nuclear site, ringed and monitored, and you do not get to wander in. Somewhere in those hills is a building that has been designed very deliberately to outlive everyone reading this and everyone they will ever meet. That was round one of Spain's nuclear story. There are two more coming, and they are worse. Number 7. Isla de Perejil, off the coast near Ceuta. This one is almost a joke, until you remember it nearly started a war. Perejil is a bare rock in the Strait of Gibraltar, about 15 hectares of scrub, 250 meters off the Moroccan coast, and a good 13 kilometers from the Spanish mainland. It is uninhabited. It has always been uninhabited. Its only regular visitors are Moroccan goats. The name Perejil simply means parsley. Spain administers it as one of its scraps of sovereign territory in North Africa, and for decades nobody gave it a second thought. Then, on the 11th of July 2002, a dozen Moroccan gendarmes landed on the rock, put up tents, and raised the Moroccan flag. Spain demanded they leave. Morocco swapped the gendarmes for Marines instead. So 6 days later, before dawn, Spain launched a full military operation to retake an uninhabited goat island, dropping special forces from helicopters onto the rock, where they arrested the garrison without a shot fired and ran up the Spanish flag. Both countries then agreed to leave it empty, exactly as it had been. And that is the part that still does not quite make sense. Two NATO neighbours brought warships and commandos to the brink over a lump of stone with nothing on it but parsley and goats. Nobody lives there now. Nobody is allowed to. It sits in the strait, claimed by two countries, useful to neither, and absolutely off-limits to you. Number 6. The biological reserve at the heart of Doñana in Huelva. On the marshes where the Guadalquivir meets the Atlantic lies one of the last great wetlands in Europe, and one of the most heavily defended pieces of nature on the continent. Doñana was made a national park in 1969 on land that had been royal hunting ground for centuries. Up to 6 million migrating birds pass through it every year. It is the last real refuge of the Iberian lynx, and home to a tiny remnant of Spanish imperial eagles. To protect all of that, the core of the park, more than 50,000 hectares of it, was sealed off as a strict scientific reserve. Not restricted, sealed. You may visit the edges, the visitor centres, a handful of marked trails, or book onto a licensed 4-wheel drive tour that skirts the fringe. But the interior is closed to the public entirely, open only to the park's own staff and to accredited researchers. And the silence in there is one of the eeriest things in Spain, because it is silence that has been engineered and guarded for over 50 years. If you are enjoying these, hit subscribe, because there is a forbidden list like this waiting for every country in Europe. And stay with me, because we are heading toward the one place on this list where the danger is not a fence or a flag, but the soil itself. First, a base where the rules get genuinely strange. Number 5, Naval Station Rota on the Bay of Cádiz. Here is where the dry tone has to give way to the facts, because what happens behind these gates is stranger than it has any right to be. Rota is a vast naval base on the Andalusian coast, more than 6,000 acres, and it is jointly run by Spain and the United States. It exists because of a deal signed in 1953 when Franco's Spain was an isolated pariah locked out of the Marshall Plan. And the Americans, wanting forward bases against the Soviet Union, offered him a way back in from the cold. In exchange for the use of Rota and 3 air bases, Spain rejoined the Western fold. The Americans built one of the most advanced naval stations on Earth, and today it berths a squadron of United States destroyers and acts as the gateway for the United States fleet into the Mediterranean. Here is the strange part. On paper, this is a Spanish base, and the Americans are merely tenants. So, the American flag is not allowed to fly over it on an ordinary day. It goes up on the 4th of July, or at half-mast, as a mark of respect, and otherwise only with the express permission of the Spanish admiral. Thousands of Americans live their whole posting on Spanish soil under a flag they are mostly not allowed to raise. You cannot drive in to see it. And the same Cold War deal that built this base is about to matter a great deal more, because it is the thread that runs straight to number 1. Number 4, the Andújar uranium mill in Jaén. Just outside the town of Andújar, beside the road, there is a low, grassed-over mound behind a fence. It does not look like much. It is one of the most quietly dangerous places in Andalusia. From 1959 to 1981, this was Spain's first nuclear installation, a factory that took low-grade ore and processed it into uranium concentrate, the raw yellow powder at the start of the nuclear fuel chain. The work was filthy, and the safety was an afterthought, and the men who did it breathed it in for years. When the factory closed, the state did not haul the contamination away. It demolished the buildings, swept the rubble and the radioactive tailings into a single pile of around 1 million tons, capped it, sealed it, and fenced it off in the early 1990s. That sealed mound is still there, and it is still measured. Every year, technicians go out and check how much radioactive radon gas is seeping up through the cap, because the targets the engineers set for the site to go quiet have not yet been met. Meanwhile, the old workers formed an association because so many of them had fallen ill, and a town that hoped uranium would make it rich got a fenced hill it cannot use instead. This is not the worst of Spain's radioactive secrets. The worst one is still ahead, and unlike this tidy capped mound, that contamination was never put there on purpose. It fell. Number 3, Isla de Alborán, alone in the middle of its own sea. Halfway between Spain and Morocco, with nothing around it for 50 kilometers in any direction, there is a flat, volcanic rock barely 600 meters long. This is Alborán, and the whole western Mediterranean is named after it. Spain took it in 1540 from a Berber corsair called Albarani, who gave the island his name, and built a lighthouse on it in the 1870s. For a long time, it was just a light and the sea. Then, in the 1960s, Soviet vessels dressed up as fishing boats started showing an interest in this lonely rock, and Spain, not wanting a Soviet outpost in the middle of its own sea, put a garrison on it. There is still one there. Around 10 Spanish Marines live on Alborán at any one time, rotated out to a windswept rock with a lighthouse, a meteorological station, and a few rusting vehicles for company. On the northern tip, there is a small walled graveyard with 3 tombs in it. And in the thin soil grows a little flower, a wild rocket called Diplotaxis sietiana, that exists nowhere else on the planet. 10 Marines, 3 graves, and 1 flower found nowhere else. All on a rock you will only ever see from the deck of a passing ship. It is, without question, the loneliest forbidden place in Spain, and one of the most eerie. After Perejil, Spain takes its rocks very seriously indeed. Number 2, Cabrera, the goat island south of Mallorca. To look at it today, Cabrera is paradise. A small dry island, an hour's sail from Mallorca, clear water, a 14th century castle on the hill above the harbour, the best preserved coastline in the Balearics. It has been a national park since 1991, and you can reach it just about if you secure one of the rationed daily permits and travel by an authorised boat. But hold on to that pretty picture, because Cabrera hides the grimmest story on this entire list, and it is exactly the kind of place this whole video has been building toward. Go back to the Napoleonic Wars. In 1809, after the French army was beaten at the Battle of Bailen, Spain had thousands of prisoners and nowhere to put them, so it marooned them on Cabrera. Around 9,000 French soldiers were put ashore on a barren island that had almost no fresh water, no shelter, and a single ruined fort. They were supposed to be fed by supply ships every few days. The ships often did not come. The men built huts, a hospital, even a theatre. They also starved. They went mad. There were documented cases of cannibalism. By the time the war ended in 1814, and the survivors were finally taken off, barely 3,600 of the 9,000 were still alive. In a cave on the northwest of the island, there are still inscriptions scratched into the rock by the men who were dying there, and the ground around it is still scattered with the buttons from their rotted uniforms. Remember the promise at the start of this. A country that sells itself as the most open in Europe. There are corners of it the public has never been allowed to walk freely, and the cave on Cabrera, where the dead scratch their names, is one of them, which leaves only one place. The worst of all of them. Number 1. Palomares, on the coast of Almería. To drive through Palomares today, you would see tomato greenhouses, a quiet farming village, the dry Almería coast. You would also see, here and there, fields ringed by chain-link fence and warning signs with nothing growing inside them. To understand why, you have to go back to one morning 60 years ago. It happened on the 17th of January, 1966. A US B-52 bomber flying a Cold War patrol with 4 hydrogen bombs aboard, climbed up to meet its refueling tanker 6 miles above the coast and flew straight into it. Both aircraft tore apart in the air. 7 of the 11 airmen were killed, and 4 hydrogen bombs fell out of the sky onto a Spanish farming village. None of them was set to go nuclear, and none of them did. But 2 of the 4 hit the ground hard enough that the conventional explosives inside them went off, and those blasts blew plutonium dust across roughly 2 square kilometers of fields and houses. A 3rd bomb came down almost intact. The 4th fell into the sea, and what followed was one of the strangest episodes of the Cold War. For 80 days, an American fleet searched the seabed off Almería for a missing hydrogen bomb, until a deep-sea submersible finally located it, and it was hauled dripping onto a deck on the 7th of April. While the world's press gathered, the American ambassador to Spain waded into the sea at a nearby beach for the cameras and announced, "If this is radioactivity, I love it." It was not so simple. American servicemen in ordinary fatigues spent months scraping up the contaminated topsoil by hand. Around 1,400 tons of Spanish earth and crops were sealed into barrels and shipped to South Carolina. For decades afterward, the official line was that the danger had been minimal, even as the cleanup men started falling ill, even as radioactive snails turned up in 2006. Even as fresh trenches of buried contamination were found in 2008. In 2003, Spain finally fenced off the worst of the land so that nobody could farm it. In 2015, Spain and the United States signed an agreement to finish the job properly and ship the last of the soil away. That agreement has still not been carried out, so the fences are still up. A handful of fields on the Almería coast have stood empty and sealed for 60 years because 4 American hydrogen bombs fell on them. And the 2 governments responsible are still, all these years later, arguing about who will clean up the last of it. There are places in Spain you cannot enter because the army is using the ground, and places you cannot enter because the science matters more than your curiosity. And then there is Palomares, where you cannot enter because of something that fell out of a clear winter sky in 1966 and was never fully cleared away. I have stood at a fence or 2 like these, and I can tell you the men who guard them have no interest in your curiosity, your camera, or your charm. As of today, the contaminated fields are still fenced, the soil is still there, and the cleanup is still unfinished. Whether you find that grim or simply absurd, it is not over. If you want the next 10 for the next country, subscribe, and we will keep walking the wrong side of Europe's fences together. Thank you.